Yeah,
Wow.
so welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Just do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, just so the listeners can hear who you are? Who am I talking to today?
Yeah, my name is Steve Alexander Smith, and I was born in Huddersfield
Oh wow.
back in December 1963,
Hmm.
long time ago, and ended up in London because it's part of my quest for a career.
Okay.
So I studied CSEs, O levels, all that sort of thing, the pre-GCSE thing,
Hmm.
and decided that with my qualifications, I decided I wanted to be a biomedical scientist.
Oh wow.
So I ended up in a big city hospital in London, living with my aunt for a few years, and 1982, and that's where I've been ever since. How did I come about writing a book on British Black gospel? Yeah, I was
Hmm.
brought up in the church, and Pentecostal church,
Hmm.
and in the heat and the furnace of gospel music. My sister's record collection contained greats like Andre Crouch,
Hmm.
Walter Hawkins. My mum and dad, it was more James Reeves. I think Elvis was in there somewhere along the line, singing Amazing Grace. So it's an amalgamation of that. But how did I come about writing the book? I'm sure the questions will come later. But
Hmm.
that was a passion. I mean, I like writing as it is. I also like history. I studied history actually academically, but I like history. I'll just translate that to music. And as far as America is concerned, I just love this whole race music history of America,
Hmm.
from slave plantation right through to modern day rhythm and blues.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's my thing. It's just a matter of throwing everything in. And somewhere along the line, I bumped into you. I think it was on Facebook, and here I am today in the COVID pandemic. Oh, and by the way, my specialist field, that medical scientist, is don't step back. It's infectious diseases. Um, so that's after studying areas like hematology, cytology, and biochemistry. But I decided to choose infectious disease because I just had this thing about microbiology, a world within a world. You know,
Right.
don't want to get too geeky,
Well,
and
I
that's
am a
it.
geek.
Yeah, and 38 years later, yeah, sticking on my white lab coat by day and practicing my writing at night. So yeah,
That
there you
sounds.
go.
It's crazy because when I think I came across your book probably
Right.
about 10 years ago,
Oh
maybe.
yes,
Is that
yes,
around
yes.
that time? Does that
Yes, it was
sound
published
right?
in 2009.
Right. Before, because I moved to London in 2010, and
Right,
like yourself, I'm very geeky a little bit, and I like history and I love
right,
music. So we
good.
have quite similar paths that way. And I was doing my own research on gospel music,
All right,
brought up
okay.
similarly to you, but I was very much just
Was it
intrigued
was it
by.
was it research from an academic point of view, like PhD,
No,
masters,
no,
or?
no, just for fun. I
All
like.
right, okay.
I'm one of those people that sit and watch documentaries and like just information about people, and you know, um, I was just really interested in where this music came from, and obviously, just like yourself, grew up in that environment. But with British gospel, I found that there wasn't really that much out there apart from what I knew already from people that I grew up around and in the moment that I was growing up. So you hear about all the stuff that's in your book. There's some things that I think, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh,
Hmm.
but then I suppose when I was being intrigued by it, I was looking, and then I came across your book in Waterstones.
All right, interesting.
So I didn't even.
Waterstones in London.
No, in Manchester.
Oh, that's good.
This
That's
this was
interesting.
this was back in like 2010, maybe 2009, just before I
Yes.
moved here.
Oh, all right, good, good,
And
brilliant.
so it's crazy because I think we connected on Facebook back then.
Hmm.
And then you sent me a message because I think you saw that I was in Manchester. I had just moved to London by then. And you were saying you were promoting your book, and I was like, I've already got your book. But I just wanted to congratulate
Right.
you as well, because I think it's a great book for those
Thank
that are
you.
listening,
Thank
and
you.
particularly because it's all drawn together. I mean, obviously it was over 10 years ago now, so things have, but I mean the history of it is, you know, has been brought together nicely, and
Thank you.
I think before that I did struggle, I'm not going to lie, to find something with all that information. There has been books before, or there has been books what
Yes.
featured bits and pieces, but in terms
That's it.
of what I was looking for at the time in one place, I thought it brought it together really well. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that. For somebody that's geeky like me, it was really helpful.
Hey, much appreciated. Thank
Really.
you.
But in terms of how long did it actually take you to write this book, and what was your process? Because it seems very detailed.
It took 10 years.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. And the process, patience, research, counter research. The book contains over 100 photographs. So a lot of that, when I linked up with the publishing company, they were equally fascinated, but they wouldn't put the book out there as a legal document, if you like, unless every single picture was sourced. So I was approached by them through an agent a few years before they published it, but it was a question of sourcing every single photograph. So that was fascinating. Some I ended up speaking to families. Others, it was the newspaper archives. Others, I found that I was basically found myself looking at the back of albums, CDs, and others were literally unknown source. So I had to write a disclaimer for that. The other was meeting people. I interviewed so many people, as you can see through the book. One or two refused to be interviewed. Wow. Yes, I know. Partly because they had withdrawn from that type of lifestyle, if you like. Or that not even lifestyle, but they no longer shared that faith. They weren't interested. But they may not have been interested, but historically, they were recorded. So I made a note of that. Whereas others had to be patient and give time for others to create time to meet, to talk. I have to say, though, that had the book gone through in its original form, I'd probably still be working on it. It would be something like 5 times as thick. But the publishing company, Lion Hudson, brilliant job with the editing and with the presentation of it. That is why today you can say you enjoyed the book, because it's in a more palatable form than it was. So yes. And did you ask me about the inspiration?
Yeah, because I know you talked about your background, but, you know, jumping from doing your biomedical science and then just thinking, you know, I'm going to write a book. What was that process in between?
Well, you know, there's a lot of lateral thinking here, because as a scientist, you write, I write protocols on a regular basis. Right. So when I write something, I think about certain steps. It has to be logical. It has to be presented well. But that wasn't enough. I have to say, there was an editor called Simon Cox that presented this book, helped me to present this book in a way that I couldn't. I mean, that's why they're professional editors. In a way that I think was absolutely brilliant. The chronological order, the way it flowed. Now, you know what? The inspiration, you've got to be looking at America. I did go to America a number of times, and just to hold this up briefly, you see that On Cloudy Day?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, that is a brick. You've got The Sound of Light by Don Cusick.
Right.
I'm not endorsing these books, but what I'm saying is this, is that in the States, you know, the American music resource, rich heritage. I studied, not professionally or as a student, but I used to visit a place called the Schomburg Institute of Black Studies in New York. Right. I'd be there as a British guy, just sitting there until the security guard tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sorry, sir, it's time to go." I was just fascinated by the wealth of history there. And it was in those days, in the mid-90s, I suppose, that I began to ask myself many questions. Okay, the Americans have their gospel music industry documented. What about the British?
Right.
So I knew that growing up in church, I knew that listening to records, I knew the history that developed in front of me in terms of the development of the London Community Gospel Choir, people creating music that was unacceptable in the church, that seemed more, if you like, acceptable by record companies. I saw that journey. It was all in my head for many years. And I thought, wow. Then after visiting libraries, like yourself, just accumulating the information as it was my wife that turned to me on one particular occasion and said, I won't tell you what she called me, not on air, but she said, hang on a minute, you've got all this information to hand, do something with it. So she ultimately inspired me to move away from geek world. Why head to the library and just gather things like a squirrel, take it one step further? And, British Black Gospel was born. In fact, interestingly enough, for the record, I was going to call it the Invisible Revolution. I've even got outtakes of pictures that we're going to include in the book, but that's another book in itself. But the name British Black Gospel came about through her inspiration. The publishers liked it. They said, you know what? Just call it what it says on the tin, British Black Gospel. But interestingly enough, many years later, I've had negative feedback from certain individuals on social networking to say that the title of your book is racist. You know what? British Black Gospel is what it is. And if there was a second book, it'd be called British Black Gospel 2. It is what it is. Okay.
It's interesting because, I think terminology has changed, keeps changing, keeps evolving. So maybe in a few years that'll be more acceptable. I've seen like people call things urban, which I'm not really a fan of that word particularly, but as time has gone on, we've changed the way we speak. But it is, like you say, it's British Black Gospel. So
the contribution of Black people in Britain towards gospel music.
And I think now
simple as that.
With the current climate that's happening, probably would be more acceptable now because people are reclaiming that, worldwide, with everything that's going on in our society at the moment, people are kind of proclaiming and waking up to looking at history and belonging as such. So maybe if we went around and asked the question now, maybe this would be more acceptable. But I hear what you're saying, because I've seen it myself, like I said, with terminology and people getting offended or more concerned what others think as opposed to what's right. It's like when it was people were offended to call people black.
That's right.
So we went through that stage, but it's very rare that black people, even black people, sometimes were offended to be called black at one point back in the day. But now it's second nature. So things evolve, terminology evolves. So and I think that nowadays it will probably be received a little bit different with all the information that's out there. So in terms of what was I saying? You write in the book. What were the difficulties in writing the book? I know you mentioned before that certain individuals didn't want to participate, but was there any other difficulties that over 10 years?
Well, one of the difficulties was motivation.
Okay.
When you come home from work, I have to admit, part of the reason why it took so long is because, you come home from work and it would just remain something on your to-do list. And you'd sit there for weeks, and then suddenly there'd be an inspiration. You'd see a gospel group on TV, or somebody'd email me and say, oh, how's this research going? Because I was researched, I have to say, prior to the publication by a number of radio stations. I think they began to catch on because there's no other book like it out there. So the prospect of a book that reflected the gospel music industry in Britain, it excited a number of media outlets. So I suppose, the most difficult challenge was, I suppose, motivation. The other was time. I work full time, and I also work for the NHS. And you know what, especially now in COVID times, it was difficult before, but now you don't seem to have any time to yourself. But you know what, it was going home, it was energizing myself, just getting on, putting pen to paper. And you speak about the challenges. One of the other challenges was gathering information together that basically wasn't there. I was creating something out of absolute nothing. So in my office today, I've still got stuff that wasn't included in the book. It was gathering information together from the different sources and presenting it in a palatable form. Something turned out today that I was quite enthusiastic about, but wasn't actually relevant. Obviously, the book had to have a commercial edge to it as well, or the publishers wouldn't have been interested. So many of my scrapbooky type interests in British Black Gospel had to remain on my desk at home. But those were the main challenges. My motivation, the time, but eventually, I think, particularly as it came close to the publication date, what really motivated me, I suppose, one email from the publishers was, you know what, Mr. Smith will give you 12 months to write this up. And typical me, I think I get this trait from my dad, who was a tailor. I had 12 months to write it up, but I think I wrote the thing up with all the information together. I started to put it down with about a month to go. Right. And procrastination. But we got there in the end, the power of technology.
Yeah, so I can kind of empathize with the lack of information, because I know in terms of even this show and songs that I know that I want to play or that I grew up listening to and not being available anymore, or trying to source things is really, really difficult. Why do you think, I mean, one of my gripes at the moment for my era and for the youngins younger than me is that it's not to listen to music from this era, from the old school, from British gospel. Like you said, American gospel's all around the place. You can Google, you can go on Spotify or whatever and find old time James Cleveland or back in the day. You know what I mean? It's easy, tangible. But with Black British gospel, I'm finding that a lot of it's not digital, and it's not kind of come in line with now. So there are albums out there, but I'm going from my own personal memory to know I remember this being played. I know it exists somewhere. Why do you think it was a challenge to get things digital? I'm going to be asking this question to quite a lot of people, because I really don't. Yeah. I'm not really. My
take on it. You know something? You could ask the same thing about British Black Gospel. Why is it? Although I celebrated Publication Day, why is it that it took somebody until 2009 to just get out there and document this stuff, pull it together? I can't completely answer that, but I knew at some point I was driven. I think the same applies to your question there about digital. Somebody has to go out there and pull this stuff together. Whether it becomes a project motivated by government funding, it might be one day that some academic goes out there, we're back to academic again, doing a PhD on this whole thing and said, right, you need to go out there, you've got funding, you've got time, hence motivation to go out there and to document, to archive, to motivate, and to bring all this stuff together. If not, it'll remain fragmented out there in your mind as you said it. Now, there is a Black History Library, or archive, should I say, in Brixton. They've got some amazing things there, but one of the things that disappointed me was that on a typical day of the week, midweek, I've been there a few times, there's not too many people around, and I'm thinking, wow, this place should be buzzing. And so I think part of the fault has to be with us. We have to gather that motivation to get out there to bring this. It's got to mean something to us. we've got to preserve. We've got to be passionate about preserving our history. Also, you say a lot of these things remain in your mind, Sophie, but I do remember I sort of went down that route, and I do remember seeing some footage on 1980s TV. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, how can I go about doing this? And woke up one morning, light bulb moment. So I got in touch with ITV, BBC. I have to say, for all those people listening, there's a lot of stuff in their archives.
Right, okay.
A lot of material in the archive. And you know what? But we have got to be determined to go out there and to dig it up. Nobody's going to knock our front door and say, here it is, mate. We've got to dig it up, pull it together. You know, so that motivation has got to be there, that determination. Black history. I mean, I'm a fan of a lot of the movies that are coming out now on TV. I mean, I subscribe to Sky, but I laughed to myself recently because I switched on to Sky's Black History channel, and I thought, wow, great movies, but they're all yesterday. The 1980s, the Spike Lee, yes, yeah, but you know what? We need to start digging up things that are new, that are relevant. So there's a lot of material out there. So who's going to dig it up? It has to be us. It has to be, as you mentioned the term earlier on, the geeks. Yeah. It has to be the geeks of this world.
It has to be the geeks. It's true, because there's a generation that's going, and like I said, your book is helpful in the fact that it's documenting people are getting of a certain age and time now that hold that information. And so that what worries me is that there's all debates going on. I've heard little debates about gospel music, or maybe some of the younger generation not understanding because they've not had access to what we've been brought up listening to, and understand the journeys and think that things have just arrived overnight. Do you understand? So they don't realize some of the legacies that are written in this book in terms of why things started, because we have to look as well at the context of some of the stories of the time, and some of the barriers during that time that stopped things from happening. We have to, I think context is everything. And at the moment, there is a generation out there that has no clue in terms of the things that all the, for instance, we're talking about people get ready.
Yes.
I see something bubbling, I'm saying on air, I see something bubbling online about people get ready and a reunion happening. I'm not sure in what form, but I've been seeing something bubbling. And me growing up watching that was really like, oh my gosh, representation. UK Black.
That's right.
People that look like me on the TV,
on the
TV, and also the whole structure of it was really professional, and we used to look forward to watching it. And I think shows like that at the time kind of opened my eyes personally to other forms, because I was very, very young at the time, but seeing different choirs and seeing different groups and putting face to names and widening what you like. So when you're getting older, you can go back and think, oh yeah, I remember them, and follow their journeys. But we've had a massive generation of nothingness on TV, and I wouldn't say that just for music. I think generally media, black media. I know that the Real McCoy's recently been put back on BBC iPlayer now, but that time from the 80s, I would say the 80s and the early 90s, things just disappeared. So the representation has gone. I think it's now building back up slightly, but it's just important, me personally, and the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing with this show and everything else is to let the young'uns know that it has been possible for things to happen, and build on what we've learned and get it better. So that's my kind of geeky avenue in what I'm interested in, and how I'm interested in Black gospel music, because I speak to people younger than me, who are like, wow, I didn't realize that, or don't feel connections with certain acts now. They don't realize that, you know, they didn't just come out of the sky the other day. They've been grafting for decades, you know,
Absolutely.
may not have had a break, may not, but they've been singing as long as I can remember, and at a level as well, at a typical professional level. It's just that it's not been recognized by, you know, the wider world, as it were.
Well,
So
one of the things I think I've achieved, and I'd like to say, is a foundation. I mean, the book is British Black Gospel, the foundation of Black music account. So, you know what? We present things to youngsters today. Tomorrow is history. YouTube, instead of a feature film, 5 minutes and you've lost their attention. So we've got to deal with that. Now, secondly, I mentioned earlier on about the what seem to be recycled movies appearing on Sky and BBC and ITV to some extent in celebration of Black History Month. But you know something? Let's take a positive out of that. At least they're featuring Black history. I think the next thing now for Black people, it's okay. How about a platform to create on top of this? And also, I think with youngsters today, it's important for them. You mentioned people get ready. A format has already been laid. Build on it.
yes.
Okay? And learn to respect and appreciate. For example, Karen Gibson recently, as you know, received an MBE. She's her choir sang at Meghan's and Harry's wedding. She's in the book. Marcia Dixon, another recipient, she's in the book. So, you know, you said earlier on, Johnny Come Lately, no, these people have had their foundations deep into gospel music. Gospel music, I still think there's a further level of development to come, but they've been there from the foundations, and they need to be respected. And youngsters of today, for example, I mentioned one group in the book, as you know, Paradise. How they were playing gospel funk. And you know what, today, with the music that we're hearing, the style of gospel music, that's no big deal. But back in those days, you played that style of music in church and you were out.
Yes, you're back there, so you're gone.
So there has been an evolutionary process. And I think it's important for those people that encounter the book to realize that, we're here, but we were there. You know, and people have overcome to get to this point. And another thing, I might be jumping the gun here, is the book's become a resource.
Yeah, it has.
So many people have approached me from non-Christian backgrounds, other music styles, and I read about British gospel music. I'm into jazz, I'm into pop, it's nice to know that there was a level of music developing at that time. I saw a whole Black History program linked to Black music in Britain in the 80s. And you know, gospel music wasn't mentioned once.
Wow.
So there's something seriously missing from those type of programs. But I do have a strong belief that in years to come, yes, it will be inclusive or part of the spectrum of music that they talk about, with its soul, jazz, R&B. Somebody suddenly realized that, wow, the Black church had a role to play in the development of music in that period of time. So, yeah.
I think a lot of the time as well, when people think gospel music, they think American gospel. And I think British gospel is very different in the fact that we do lend from our American people, I suppose, in terms of that was what was visible to us at the time. Also, the Caribbean has a massive part on it as well, because the fusion of like the Windrush generation coming over here and settling here, and then their children, and picking up all the styles. I think a lot of people that think gospel think American gospel. So that's another reason why I think your book is kind of encapsulating all that's gone before, with regards to.
And I'd like also to think that it's raised a debate. You know, like you said, so many people associate gospel with America. But do you know something? Wow, it's interesting how when Meghan chose her choir. She could have chosen an American gospel choir. So I think it's a huge platform for British gospel. And I had people saying to me, "Oh, they were British, that group." I said, "Yes." And one newspaper, the day after, they ran the article. I don't know if you read it. It was based on Karen Gibson, and it went into a background. And yeah, I felt proud. I felt, wow.
No, I was very, very proud because, like I said,
it was a moment of discovery for them. Yeah.
And I think if you know them personally and you know how far they're coming from, it was very proud to watch.
The Kingdom Choir, yes.
Yeah, because it's like, wow, they're being respected across, globally, and they did an amazing job. They represented well, and they were just themselves as well, which sometimes we can get caught up in trying to be. And they were respected for being themselves by, our peers across globally. And
may I add, Sophie, that I recently saw this article on Stormzy, and he's written a book. He had a number of things to say, and it's interesting how gospel and grime music could, I'm not saying it will, but could follow the same trajectory. For years, as you know, grime was underground music. It was, the mainstream were not interested, and all of a sudden it had its day. And I think with gospel, it'd be a similar thing. Then suddenly, I think the mainstream will lift the lid and realize, wow, there's more than just another level of music. There's history. It's just for those people that are involved to just keep going and keep producing quality music.
And I think with this station Affinity Xtra, I think like I was saying, it's very vast in terms of the different genres. So like you say about grime music, about drill music, about R&B, hip hop, it's very much all gospel, and it's all captured on the same station. So for me, being an old school head, as I would call myself, I've been exposed to all different types of genres because it's 24 hours. So many a times when I'm working and I'm listening to Affinity in the background, when I'm working, I'm hearing, like you say, totally different genres and good quality music. So we have moved. I think it's about, like you say, platforms and allowing people to know it's here. I don't, sorry, pardon me, I don't mean to interview the interviewer, but just wanted to, I don't want to place you on the spot, but I mean, as I said, I studied American race music. And for a while, until the 40s, that's all it was to the mainstream, just a bunch of black music all thrown together. And when you actually decipher that music bunched together, it's interesting how, maybe one day a book will come out of this, I was wondering how there was a lot of gospel music labels, as well as rhythm and blues, as well as jazz. But gospel music in itself had a very strong identity. After the lid was lifted, if you like, it was only until the 90s when you had the likes of Kirk Franklin's and that it really started to come into its own and actually become a billion-dollar industry. But I just wonder, do you think we're going through that same process in Britain where our music is being, if you like, lumped together, whether rightly or wrongly, and will it find its own individual identity over a period of time? I think, I take your point, and I do think that's happening. I think we're probably a bit further on than that now. I think maybe about 10 years ago, sort of sounds were similar, but it's very clear there's very much an audience that are going neck in neck with non-gospel genres. So like you're saying about grime, hip hop, there's so many artists at the moment that are going head to head with their secular counterparts that are being respected. So I think I hear what you're saying, and I think we're moving a little bit further ahead than that. I think it's coming to a head now where people, I'm being exposed to it, but I've always been in my little box of this is what I like, If unless it's been presented to me in a certain way, I wouldn't go out and search for certain things. If I hear something and I like it, that's me. I'm not kind of a trend. I don't jump on trends like that. But if it happens to be a certain genre and I like it, then I just like it. So
Right.
I think we're moving forward to, especially the younger ones now that are being more creative around owning their passions.
Mm-hmm.
and then
Sophie, it's interesting listening to what you said, because you talk about the generational thing earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
I remember interviewing I'm sure you can relate to this, as I'm sure you're not as old as I am, but you said that you listen widely. I remember I couldn't listen to reggae music in my house. It was completely out of bounds. And I do remember on one anecdote where I was in the church, and an individual stood up and said, I love Earth, Wind and Fire, and the pastor told her to sit down. So we are indeed coming a long way.
I think I was quite lucky.
A long way.
I think I was quite lucky in my house, because I am the youngest, and I'm not sure kind of the lips, I would say, that my siblings went through, but I had a quite easier ride when I was growing up, in terms of different styles of music. Different styles of music. So I listened to everything, but I do understand, like, probably my brother's generation or the generation before, it was very negative. Like, reggae music was very negative in the church. But then I would go to church and hear ska. I would hear ska in church.
Thank you.
So I didn't understand. I didn't understand. The organ was ska, and the clapping, and but I think it reminded, with I'm from a Caribbean background, so I think a lot of the music that they would class as devil's music or whatever reminded them of a time when they were not serving God, and that was a reminder for them, and so therefore we don't want to mix that with anything, because that's not holy.
But yet, when the spirit dropped and the deacon got hold of the Gibson,
what's that?
It's ska, yes, ska all the way. Which used to baffle a lot of us, because we'd be thinking, the youngsters would be thinking, we were told not to play reggae, and it's strumming away a ska track.
Yeah, it's their expression, and it's interesting. Yes. We've got a show on Affinity called The Edge, which is on a Saturday at 3:00 for anyone listening, and there's lots of discussions, just out there discussions about stuff. And the other day we were talking about Jim Reeves and how Jim Reeves, like you mentioned earlier, Jim Reeves, Elvis Presley, and that type of music was acceptable, but they were secular artists. And they were very much acceptable in your house. So when other secular artists of today, because we're talking about Kanye West and we're talking about Snoop and other people that have done gospel albums, like it or not, there's different opinions about that. But I'm saying, well, what is the difference really? Why is that acceptable?
There is no difference.
Right. Yes. So I was saying to I would say boss man, Mr. Roger Moore, I was saying to him that we're just not consistent.
It's a double standard.
That we do. We're not consistent. We will, do as I say, but not as I do, kind of thing. And, people are asking questions now. The youngers are asking questions now. They're just like, what you're saying don't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you came across this grime drill band, gospel grime drill band called what's the name now? Hope Dealers.
Yes, I did.
Now, okay, that's a whole nother show, but I had flashbacks because, they claim to be playing inspirational gospel music. They were wearing balaclavas on their heads, which I just can't get it. I just can't connect with. But then I thought, going back in my time machine, they possibly worse, Sophie, the Paradises of the modern era. Because when Paradise started strumming away on their first album, a reggae track, that was the track that banned them from certain. In fact, a number of people, I never did get a chance to go to any of their concerts, but a number of people tell me that the pastor would stand up and say, nobody is allowed to go to Paradise concerts because they play the devil music.
No.
Right? So in their day, they were putting out drill music. But do you know what? When I did my studies, so many Paradise albums sold in the US on the Onyx label. And there's a lot of rare soul, rare grooves, non-Christian fans that can relate to the band back in the 80s. And what they tell me was, because far from just interviewing characters for the book, I spoke widely to so many different people. This is why I think that Christian and non-Christian can relate to the book, because I wanted, the publisher said, look, we want you to put a book out there that raises curiosity amongst non-Christians. We don't want you to preach to the converted. And one of the things they often said was, I could connect with the beat. I knew that it was religious, but there was something about their music and authenticity that drew me, and the talent. And I always felt that going forward, I felt, you know what, I'm not in a group, I'm not a manager, but I felt that if anybody wants to connect with the mainstream, you have to move away from what I regard as pure gospel. You've got to try and create a sound that those people in mainstream can relate to. All right, the lyrics is another matter. But yeah, you've got to know your market. And Paradise, again, going back to the book, a number of people have gone onto YouTube and discovered their music through the book. So there's a template there. There's templates right across the book on how to go about this process if you want to be successful. So, yeah.
No, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think as we go through different generations, there's going to be a paradise in every genre, you know, in every generation.
Somebody that takes this thing to the cutting edge, the boundary.
Because look at Kurt Franklin. You mentioned Kurt Franklin. Well, look at even look at Edwin Hawkins. You can go back to think of, you know, Oh Happy Day. That was a big hit, you know, in the clubs and whatnot. And then you've got the Clark sisters, and then, you know, they were shunned because they was on the Grammys doing whatever. You know, every era's had their moment. And I think when you look
every era's had their moment, yes.
When you look back to Kurt Franklin, it was when he dropped Stomp. Was it Stomp? He dropped, because his first album, the first albums were still gospel-y, you know, you could sing it in your choir. When he dropped Stomp and it had the rap and it was like, who is this man? And, you know, but now you hear it, you think it's just gospel music. It's not that edgy.
How dare he introduce a sample of George Clinton?
Wow. Well,
psychedelic funk.
No, people don't realize Kurt Franklin is known for the samples, the Patrice Rushen sample, and you know, so many samples that he uses on every album. That's when people start arguing about, I don't like when people, and I'm like, it's the same music that you're listening to. So, you know, all the stuff.
But you know something, you've got me. I have to say, you've got me started now. But prime example of that is a lot of people see Mahalia Jackson as, if you like, the mother of gospel music, the grandmother, godmother. She had a bit of stick in her day because there was one occasion where she tried to introduce blues into her music. My God, how dare she? So she was reprimanded.
Sat down.
You know, and this is why I put a question out on a social networking channel recently. Are Christians really allowed to create as far as they possibly can, or are there restrictions? When you're a musician, whether it's a Christian musician or not, how far are you allowed to go down the creativity process? In the pop world, they can be as creative as they like. But could it be that in Christian music, we're still wearing straight jackets? Does creativity strike fear into the souls of the pastoral elite who think, oh my God, no, you can't go down there? It's a good question, I think, which I've never really received an answer to.
I think, like I said, I think our young'uns at the moment are doing what they're doing. And I think they're not
Yes.
as hesitant as maybe the older generation. So the quality of music that's coming out is on par with, you know, what is out there generally. So played to anyone, they wouldn't specifically pigeonhole it and say, oh, this is watered down. It's just the message behind it is gospel, and their creative music side is just, you know. So I think the young ones have got it down. I think some of the older ones that are still in the music industry maybe still kind of tiptoeing, because, you know, you're feeling that you might not, you might get backbenched if you do this or if you
Yeah.
do
Yes. Yeah.
that. But I think that comes with trauma. I think, as we spoke about this on one of the other shows, we talked about church hurt and trauma, and I think sometimes we've been programmed to act a certain way, and, you know, we know repercussions of certain things, so we're not as bold with you know, doing things that we want to do because of the certain repercussions or what people are going to think. Whereas I think now the younger generation are unapologetic about creativity.
Do you think it's also a lack of trust from leadership? Let the youngsters express themselves.
I
But is
think
it a
it's a
lack of trust in the sense that
misunderstanding. I think
you're letting them express? But I recently listened to a grime artist from Liverpool, a young lady. And I have to say, Sophie, had I not listened to the words, it'd be just like any other grime track. But I thought, wow, this is different. So she was a gospel artist. You'll probably hear of her soon. And I'll send you a link as soon as any material is released. But I got in touch with a record company and they says, you know what? Yeah, we're just looking for a release date. But I thought, wow, it's almost got to the point now where it's not even the style of music, but it's the lyrics. Or is it?
Well,
Or is it?
that's
Because
another question, because is gospel music the lyrics or the music? And in one breath, you have the genre of gospel music, or what's known as gospel music, that you would click, you know, you say gospel, and in your head, you think of certain artists that fit into that category. And then you've got lyrically gospel music. That's a big question, because some people feel
well,
uncomfortable with that.
but Sophie, 10 years ago when I was doing, or should I say during the 10-year journey, I made many stop-offs of my book, British Black Gospel. And one of the stop-offs, if you like, and that's the other thing I should have mentioned earlier on, I have a tendency to just, I don't know, drift off. And that's because there was, if you like, no academic prize at the end of this. It wasn't for a PhD or a master's, or it was me time. So I think part of my weaknesses or challenges was to just discipline ourselves and don't stay in the library and read about paradise or whether it was for the whole evening. You've got to move on with your research. And I bumped into a gentleman called Paul Williams. I don't know if you know who Paul Williams is. A musician, is a gospel jazz musician, guitarist, yeah. And Paul at the time, in fact, it's recently come to fruition, but Paul at the time was talking about putting out a whole album that was not singing, but just jazz, jazz guitaring. And I thought, hang on a minute, how does that work? So it's not the words, it's not the lyrics, it's somebody expressing themselves, a Christian guy expressing himself through his instruments. And I thought, that is a completely different dimension. So, I mean, even the word gospel, I mean, I know I keep throwing the phrase that that's another show. Even the word gospel used to be outlawed back in the early 20th century. It was the spirituals. How dare they bring this gospel thing into the church? What is that? So, you know, terminology evolves.
Yeah, it does.
You know?
It does. And I think people are just have missed the point sometimes when it comes to sharing the message of gospel music, and it's not for us, as it were. It's for everyone, and it's that bridging of sharing, you know, to everyone outside of the church. So, you know, I know we enjoy it within the building,
Mm,
but
yes.
it is supposed to be a message. So, you know, whatever's palatable to those that are out there that can actually understand and relate and get something from it, you know. But there is room for everyone to do whatever they want to do. So if you want to be traditional, as it were, and I keep saying terminology's changed and times have changed. So some certain things are relative that were traditional back in the day or are now classed as traditional, but weren't traditional 10, 20 years ago. So it's going to continue to change. It's going to continue to change. So what are you listening to now? Do you listen to anything current or gospel music wise? Are you into anybody
Yeah,
new?
gospel music wise, I
What?
try to listen to new stuff,
Okay.
you know, because there's so much. I think gospel now has just exploded
Yeah.
into, and you know, the other day I was just on YouTube and I listened to Congolese gospel. Um, Recently, I went back, started to look at music, gospel music across Africa, across different continents.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's different expressions of that one message. Also, you know, every now and again, I get, I don't want to say obsessed, but I listen to certain, Noel Robinson. I'm listening to a lot of Noel Robinson at the moment because I do think Noel's underrated. You know, I'm, I'll say that on air. He's an underrated musician. He's a absolutely brilliant
Consistent.
guitarist.
Noel is probably one of the most consistent
Yeah,
that we've had.
yeah. But do you
Celebrate.
know what?
Mhm.
I don't know why, but I personally think Noel should be on another level in terms of mainstream, in terms of, I don't know. I don't.
He's got a new show. Have you seen it? He's got a new
Yes, I've seen it
reality.
on
Yeah.
Vox, yeah, which
So
is good. But when you think that man is a legend, he's a journeyman,
mhm.
but yeah, the music as a whole, the whole gospel music-y thing. Do you know what? When I go back, project back to the 1980s, I do think sometimes that, you know, we debate about why is it that gospel music isn't so widely accepted in Britain.
Mhm.
I think when you tap back into the 80s, we are probably our own worst enemies because it was very much internalized. Would you blame for that? Not allowed to perform here, not allowed to listen to that. Not, and you think to yourself, wow. So you've had reggae music, soul pushing on, but gospel was always, let's keep it inside our institutions. We don't want to be out there amongst the worldly. And I do think as a result, it's lagged. I think, but hopefully now with different channel outlets
Yeah.
and marketing, I have to say marketing as well, the skill of marketing. Yeah, I think the music will get out there eventually. Yeah. But like I said, going back to Noel, yeah, I do think Noel should be on a higher platform and he
Yeah.
deserves that.
No, he definitely. I think as far back as I can remember in my little time being on this earth, Noel Robinson's been there. Whether it him
You
be
mentioned people get ready.
yeah, I was watching an old one the other day on YouTube and I saw a little Noel on there with his guitar.
He's
So
there.
yeah, so I mean,
He's
people
there.
that know Noel now probably see Noel as praise and worship leader, but Noel's been grafting for a long time, you know, and he's consistent.
Incredibly long time.
He's passionate about it. He's
Yes.
consistent about it, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think with regards to other people, maybe have dipped in and out of it, you know, may have had a bit of
Yes.
a
Yeah.
hiatus, come back, did something else, but he's just been building on what he's always. Because I know
Yeah.
that he worked with Graham Kendrick from
That's right.
time,
Yes.
so this whole praise and worship movement thing isn't anything new. He's been
No.
solely
And
manning that
yeah.
for
Yeah. Glad to see that. I think he's signed to
Thompson as well.
Integrity. I think he's signed to Integrity Music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know something, Sophie, I'm a strong believer in that consistency will eventually.
Mm-hmm.
It has to. Um, if it's the one thing my late dad used to preach to us, well, look, just determination, just get in there. And you know what? He's created a body of music. And in so many other media platforms, if you like, the music industry, once you put something out there, eventually it will find its way to the surface if it is of quality, of integrity. I mean, I was watching this program the other day. Sorry if I digress. This movie,
No, go on.
12 Years a Slave,
Mm-hmm.
and the story goes that the book was literally lost in the archives for 100 years.
Wow.
And it was only when Steve McQueen's wife came across the book, I don't know what it was, whether it was in a small specialist bookshop, that she said, "Hey, you're a film director. I read this book. What do you think?" And there you go. That book was resurrected again. So, you know, everything has its time. And those that are consistent, yeah, the time will come.
Oh, the time will come. The time will come. We're coming to the end currently.
All right, okay, okay.
But we can do this again. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed catching up. And like I said, congratulations on the book. Where can people purchase this book now? This book, Gospel. Where can they purchase this book?
Well, I have to say that I'm not the greatest salesman, but the book's available on Amazon. But about 18 months ago, it went out of print. Like I said, I've probably just killed off my sales. But I will say there's so many of them in circulation. And I do believe recently, I was surprised to hear that some have become collector's items, particularly with my signature on. And
sign mine then.
Oh, wow. Yes. And I was quite intrigued. And in fact, somebody at work purchased one and said, "Oh, Steve, could you sign this? So after you've disappeared, I'm sure the investment value will raise." I thought, yeah, thanks very much.
Have you thought about doing an audio book?
Yes, I have. Yes, I've approached the publishers, and it's something that they are looking into, which I think, come on, it's well overdue. But yes, that has been spoken of. I've also looked into the idea of a British Black Gospel too.
Yeah,
I've got my material. I've been writing a book.
Go for it. My whole question, like I said, is legacy. Legacy.
Yeah.
Is, you know, we're not going to be here for very long, and we need to make a mark of you know, our time here.
But I have to say, Sophie, right? I hope my publishers are listening, but it's been put to the table, but there's red tape here and there. All they have to do is to give it the green light, and there's a number 2 out there. So, not to say, guys, you did a brilliant job with 1, but I think 10 years has passed now. There should be a 2, and other things have happened since then.
And then,
update,
yeah, things have moved on slightly since this book.
Yes,
but
yeah.
It's been a fantastic chat, Steve. I've really enjoyed it, and hope we can do it again.
Yes, you know something? Funny enough, you just choose a chapter, and we could discuss around it. There's 8 chapters in that book. We could choose a chapter and discuss around it. Yeah,
definitely. We're definitely coming back, but
it'd be a great pleasure. Yes.
So Take Me Back is airing at 2:00 on Sunday, sorry, and then it repeats on a Thursday at 1 p.m.
Good.
on Affinity Xtra.
Okay, I'll
tune in.
I'll get my network ready.
And well, it's been great. So we'll catch up soon. Thank you for participating again and your time. I know it's late, but your time, I really appreciate today.
I have to say thank you very much for the opportunity. We write books, but it's journalists and media outlets like yourself that give us the opportunity to talk about them.
And
very much appreciated.
Probably never heard of your book and will now go and Google search and do their research, and need to put them back in print, Steve, and get them back.
Yes. Oh? Lineups, and are you listening?
And,
I may even sign one of them one day.
I know. Okay. Sign mine, definitely. I'll have to meet you to.
I will. Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Okay.
All right. You take care, and we will
too, Sophie.
Really soon. All right.
Yeah.
See you later.
Thanks to you. Okay. Right. Bye.
Bye.